Buongiorno, buon pomeriggio, buonasera. Oh dear, I messed all that up. Buonasera and buonanotte. That covers all the times. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Wild Wild Podcast. I'm Adrian Smith, and I can't talk for some reason. But luckily, I have with me the man of 1,000 podcasts who can speak for both of us. It's Rodney Barnett.
Hello. I don't know about 1,000, but quite a few.
Oh, must be. It must be. I think I like that. I finally checked our emails, and we had a few, and somebody refers to you as the man of 1,000 podcasts. Oh no, wait, that might not have been in one of the emails. This week, the Blu-ray that we've been talking about a few times on the podcast, The Sex of Angels, has finally been arriving after a long delay with delivery and people getting furious on Facebook that their orders hadn't turned up. They finally showed up. So I think it was actually somebody on Facebook called you the man of 1,000 podcasts, referring to our commentary track. But I'm going to keep it and use it. I think it's good. So
oh my goodness,
yeah, so that's out now finally, and people are going to get to hear that, which is exciting. The availability of that disc is a bit tricky at the moment, and I am well aware of the postage costs. I believe Elia is posting them out individually from Rome or from Italy. I think he's in Rome. I think eventually it will be stocked with people like Diabolic in America, hopefully, which will make it a bit more accessible, but yes. People have ordered it, and so it's a fun film. We've talked about it on here before, and I really hope that people enjoy discovering that little gem of a movie.
Yeah, it's really a bit of a hidden film in exploitation history. Italian cinema has kind of done its best to kind of
erase.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah. Now, speaking of commentaries, it seems like not a day can go past without another disc being announced that has Rod on it. This, since we last recorded, Rod, something very exciting has been announced, which I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about. Last year, you appeared on the Arrow box set. I believe was it like Gothic Fantastico, something like that.
Right.
And now Severin are doing a very similar thing with their box set, Danza Macabra, Volume 1. I like how they've called it Volume 1, and I listened to their podcast, and they've got at least 3 planned at the moment, I believe. But this is Danza Macabra, the Italian Gothic Collection. Now, first of all, I have to say that when I heard it was called Danza Macabra, I naturally got my hopes up. But Danza Macabra, aka Castle of Blood, is not on the set. So they've teasingly given it the name of a film that they're not putting out. But you never know. Maybe in a future volume.
Well, I'm aware of the contents, or at least some of the contents of a possible second, a definite second volume.
Right.
It's a thrilling thing to finally be getting a lot of these movies in nice special editions over here. It's long overdue, I have to say.
Yeah, and so this set, like the Arrow set, which was produced by Kat Ellinger, this one is also being produced by Kat Ellinger. So Severin have kind of brought her in to do a similar thing for them. So tell us about can you tell us the films and your involvement with this set?
This first set is going to have four films, and I have to admit, one of them is one I have never seen before, so I'm extraordinarily excited about that one. But the big ones, the ones that are more commonly known, let's just say there was a fantastic version of one of them that came out in England a few years ago, but it's nice to have an American upgrade. That would be Lady Frankenstein, which is just an astonishing film, and the raft of extras they've produced for that. I cannot wait to dig into 2 commentary tracks, several featurettes. Man, I cannot wait. Even a German TV documentary about the film. This is
and of course you and I did a podcast on this one about 5 years ago.
Fantastic film.
Yeah,
just an incredible movie. Also, the set includes The Monster of the Opera from '64, which is kind of an absolutely fascinating film, and one that I think, although not as well known as Lady Frankenstein.
Yeah, because isn't it? It's like a semi-sequel or a thematic sequel to The Vampire and the Ballerina. I think it's like connected to that. Now I do know that Malumbra Film, so basically Elia, who's just done The Sex of Angels, his next film was going to be The Monster of the Opera. So I'm not entirely sure, because I know he was involved in getting the restoration done, whether this is that restoration or I don't know what's happened there, but this was going to be the next movie for him potentially. So
I don't
that's
know.
quite interesting that it's suddenly been announced over here. So maybe because he'd got the restoration going in Rome for that film, that's how it's got on Severin's radar, perhaps. But yeah, I've never seen The Monster of the Opera, so that does sound like a fun one. And then 2 more. Tell us about those.
Well, the one that I know absolutely nothing about, because I've never seen it, is The Seventh Grave from 1965. When you read the description of it, it becomes one of those things where you're a little shocked that you haven't seen it, because it does seem to be kind of a variation on the old classic Cat and the Canary idea.
Yes. Let me just read from the website here. It says, Cat and the Canary, mixed with odd dollops of mad doctors, escaped lepers, giallo-style killings, and one of the most strikingly original seance sequences in the entire genre. Now, when I first read that, I thought I read that as dance sequence rather than seance sequence. But I mean, either would have been fine. But I know this is a film that's only ever really been available through sort of bootleg copies from presumably Italian TV or something. So yeah, it's never had any kind of half decent release. So yeah, it's I'd never even heard of it, to be honest.
Oh yeah, I was unaware of it completely, so I'm very excited about that one. That'll probably be the first one of the set that I crack open and watch.
Yeah, well, which leaves us with the final film, which is your starring moment.
Well, believe me, the film is well worth more than having me babble about it. But Scream of the Demon Lover from 1970 is an astonishing piece of work, and one that I've been in love with for decades. It's just like all the other films of this type that I've ever seen. I originally caught up with them via bootleg VHS from way back. But yes, I was asked to contribute a commentary track to this film. So I teamed up with Robert Monell, and we sat down and did a commentary track where we run through this movie, hopefully giving a fair amount of information about it as we go along. And it's just amazing. I was thrilled to learn that they actually have a brand new interview with the lead actress of the film, Erna Schurer, who really is the center of Scream of the Demon Lover. Her performance is excellent, and it's wonderful to know that they were able to talk to her and get her on the record about this. This is great. I mean, the extras packed onto this entire set are insane. I'm very excited about this, and like you said, man, if there are going to be 2 or 3 more, bring it on.
I mean, I really hope that because they've called it Danza Macabre, that means they are going to get Castle of Blood, because I know that's getting a full 4K restoration by a French company that I've been in contact with, and they used something that I'd written about the film for their one of their recent newsletters. So I know it's getting a proper restoration, so perhaps we can hope. But anyway, Scream of the Demon Lover. So is this the film where, when they sent you the restored element, you identified that there was a load of stuff missing?
Nope, that's another film entirely.
Oh, okay. Is that another one that's not been announced yet, or was that?
Yes, that is another one that has not been announced.
Oh, okay.
Yet,
wow. All right. Is that for the second volume? Are we able to say that much?
I do not know. I don't know how these things are going to shake out. Until official announcements are made, not only can I not say anything, I don't know. So
yeah, fair enough. It's funny how long these things take. I was interviewed 2 years ago for a feature-length documentary that was supposed to be on a Severin release, and it still hasn't been announced.
Oh wow! Okay.
And like they came to my house and filmed me, and you know, by the time it comes out, I'm going to watch it and think, "God, wasn't I young? Look at that! Look at my hair color in that documentary."
This is before I gave up on life. Look, I still have hope. You can see the hope in my eyes.
I know. But seriously, it's like been about 2 years and it still hasn't been announced. It's amazing how long. Well, I just, you know, as these things can just take a long time, particularly if they're trying to get film elements and blah blah blah.
Definitely.
Well, this is a very exciting development for everyone who loves Gothic horror, which is, of course, all of us, I would imagine. So this comes out in end of May. I will probably be giving it about a year and a half and then getting it in one of their Black Friday sales. Because much as I'm very keen to have these, I know I've still got box sets I bought 3 years ago that I haven't watched yet, so I can wait a little bit. But no, I'm very excited to see if this is going to be a whole line of films. Then that's really cool because there are so many. I love the Italian Gothics, and yeah, there are like just hundreds that could go into something like this. So
it's a very exciting announcement.
Yeah, really cool. Well, congratulations on your involvement with that.
Once again, my involvement is very small in comparison. I'm just happy to be asked to come along and help out.
Yeah, well, very good. Well, I think that's all the news I've got. Oh yeah, I just wanted to mention I've just listened to your episode on the Maciste films, episode of The Bloody Pit.
Oh yeah.
And I did tweet the link out for that as well. But if anyone is listening who hasn't heard that yet, do you want to tell us a little bit about that episode?
Oh, well, Mark Maddox and I decided to talk about a couple of the recent Blu-ray releases of two Maciste films. We talk a little bit about how, you know, that run of movies that were made in the 60s that are kind of a mystery to Americans who were introduced to them in various dubbed fashions, where Machiste's name was usually changed to either Samson or Hercules or something. And these two movies are no different in that respect. But now, of course, we have gorgeous widescreen, you know, high definition prints with the ability to see it in the Italian original with subtitles, as well as often the dubs are popped up there as well. But it's a real joy to finally see some of these incredible Sword and Sandal films getting releases that they, in my opinion, have deserved for a long period of time. So Maddox and I talked about Son of Samson, which, of course, is a very different title from the real
was
title.
that one? Was it Maciste in the Valley of the Kings? Was that one?
Yes, if memory serves. Now I'm going to get them mixed up as I look back at this, of course.
It's very easy to.
Yes, it is. When I discovered that there were actually 25 Maciste films made in the 1960s, you know, when you do the research on that character and the fact that he really is kind of a timeless character who essentially pops up anywhere, any time period, any time, you know, it certainly answered a lot of strange questions that I had forever, which goes back to me first spotting the character being called Maciste in a film in which he, you know, this Italian muscle man pops up in Scotland. So, you know,
yes, Maciste all'Inferno. Maciste in Hell, or The Witch's Curse. Yeah, that is a great one. I've got a poster for that one somewhere. Which
wow, really?
Yeah, I need to put it up. Yeah, it's really cool.
The poster art for those films are almost, you know, 9 times out of 10 mind-bendingly wonderful. Just gorgeous pieces of artwork that really give you a sense of the grandeur and wonder that these films are attempting to put on screen. It's great stuff.
And there's about I mean, I don't think anybody will agree on an exact figure, but some people reckon there was about 600 Peplum films.
Oh, there's no telling.
You know, in that sort of 7-8 year period. So yeah, there are so many. You could never watch them all, but they are great fun.
Well, I have a couple of reference books that probably do a good job of nailing down how many of them there were, but the problem you run into are alternate titles confusing everything under the sun. So,
and also defining whether you're just talking about the mythological films
Yeah.
or if you're going to include the kind of adventure films, is the Golden Arrow by Antonio Margheriti a peplum, or is it an Arabian Nights adventure movie? Did the Robin Hood films count? People have different ideas of what peplum includes.
And it does get down to, in some cases, honestly, just personal taste. But at the same time, I really kind of love all of those kinds of movies, all those adventure films made in that period. I have a dream of one day being able to do a really in-depth look, multiple podcast episodes covering Italian Robin Hood films and just European Robin Hood films in general. Essentially,
that sounds like a mini season for this podcast.
Oh yeah, well there is that as a possibility. I mean, they're not the easiest films to get your hands on. You're pretty much going to be dealing with bootlegs every time. But at the same time, you also have to realize that just because Robin Hood is in a title doesn't mean it has anything at all to do with Robin Hood. They'll toss that name into a title just to kind of enhance it or to give you an idea of the content within, or just to fool you into thinking you're getting a Robin Hood film when actually it's I don't know, a karate movie or possibly a spaghetti western. Who the hell knows?
Excellent. And I just also, in a moment of synchronicity, I just did a podcast with Cult Connections, which is a very prolific podcast, and we talked about 3 peplum films. So one more than you. Not that it's a competition, but
but you won. So there.
But we did 3, and I'm trying to remember what they all were. I think we did Samson and Hercules, the first one, and I've already forgotten the other one. But anyway, that was quite. So you can find that if anybody wants to hear that as well. Cult Connections. But yeah, I mean, they're such great entertainment. Those peplum films.
Well, I will say this about the peplum films, the sword and sandal stuff, any of that stuff. When at least for me, when I'm in the mood for that, nothing else will do. I don't know what it is. I think a part of it is just having seen some of them when I was a kid, and therefore it tickles a particular nostalgia bone in me somewhere or another. So it's if you like them, you like them. But a lot of people just kind of look at them and wonder what in hell happened to people in the 1960s.
Yeah. Well, they're wrong. What can we say? But speaking of, here's a segue. Speaking of mythological films, those films often featured Roman mythology and Roman scenes, as well as Hercules and all those guys. And of course, the Romans frequently. Sorry, I'm getting myself lost in my own segue. The Roman films frequently features sequences with gladiators, which I know it's terrible. It's torture.
Wondered where you were going with that.
Which brings us to this week's film in our post-apocalypse journey, and we are going to talk about 2020 Texas Gladiators. So, 2020 Texas Gladiators, or I gladiatori del futuro, gladiators of the future. So, my first question is, did you spot any gladiators in this film?
Only in the broadest sense of the term. It's I can kind of respect the titling in a number of ways. One, from my memory, now it was only 3 years ago, but 2020 seems like it was much rougher in reality than in this film. But I could be wrong.
I mean, we were all, I don't know about you, but we were all dressed like this in 2020 over here, you know. 2 weeks of 2 weeks of lockdown, and we'd all gone full Mad Max.
Yeah, that was one of the strange bits of verisimilitude. I was stunned by the idea that I was like, I don't know about anyone else, but you know, these people in this film don't look like they're bathing very often, and yet bathing is what we did constantly during 2020.
Yeah, that's true.
But
yeah,
but I do have a lot. I have to say the gladiator aspect of it. It really only. I mean, you have to take a broad kind of 5,000 foot level view to
what
give
is a
them
gladiator.
Yeah, and I would say that those characters, those sort of hero characters at the beginning of the film, fit it to a degree because they are kind of a roving band of violent warriors taking on scumbags and bad guys, and that is that is a nice way to look at it. But yeah, it's a very broad term.
They're not really not really gladiators, but we are in Texas. And my other question with this title,
by the way, we're not. We're definitely not in Texas. We're trying to pretend that we are.
Yeah,
we're not,
I mean there's cowboys and Indians, so
there's that. Yeah.
But what's also funny with this is 2020. Which bit of the film is 2020? Does that mean the first scene is a prologue, and then the rest of the film is in 20? Because there's a 5 or 6 year jump,
right?
And so I wasn't sure.
I have to say that one of the flaws of this film, and one of the flaws of this film that I cannot actually come up with a good defense of, is that the time jumps, sometimes multiple year time jumps, are very poorly spelled out.
Yeah.
I mean, in the first one, you kind of have to be paying attention because at first, on my rewatch here, this is the first time I've seen this movie in a good long while. I at first thought that when we do this time jump and we see good old Al Cliver working, working on these gas works, these pumps and things, I thought.
Did you think it was someone else?
No, I thought it was a flashback.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I know. We'll get to that. It's really funny. We'll get to that. But let's just quickly go into the background of this film. So, this, as we spoke about the great Luigi Montefiore last week, and here he is again. He wrote this one. There are so many different English names in the credits for this film. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, everyone's name was anglicized ridiculously. Yeah.
Yeah, so George Eastman wrote this, and then originally this was a project for him to direct as well. And I believe, according to the book that I'm using, After the World Ends, he did direct for the first few days, but he was getting a bit overwhelmed. So he called in his friend Joe D'Amato to take over. So, I mean, you could say that might partly explain why it's a bit of a mess. I don't know. But... who knows? The credited director is Kevin Mancuso, that great,
who is someone who does not exist.
That great director, yeah. And I think George Eastman has a different name in the credits as well. But anyway, yeah, Kevin Mancuso. So this is a George Eastman jam with Joe D'Amato helping out. It's a shame that there's no decent print of this. The only available print that I can find is from a VHS recording. There are a couple of versions of that on YouTube when they're all cropped to 4:3, and you can imagine if this was directed by Joe D'Amato, it's probably going to look good because obviously his cinematography background, he was a great cinematographer, so it probably looks pretty good, but it's not that easy to tell with the composition because it's all been cropped.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and just flat out say that I think that this is a film that is it is ready for rediscovery because it has. Let me put it in terms that won't make me sound like a total lunatic. One, it will be a film that would be making a leap from VHS to probably Blu-ray is what I'm saying. So that is always a thing of interest if a movie has managed to skip completely a valid DVD release, which is very rare for exploitation films of this type. But it's also one that has so many points of interest You know, it has all of the requisite exploitation bits and pieces. It has you know, lots of violence. I mean, like lots of action, lots of violence, you know, a fair amount of nudity. It's got a nasty streak. It's got all of the pieces and things that you would expect a fan of this particular type of film to look for in one of these things. And it's also underseen. It's without ever having had a decent video release of any type. This is one that I think would fit right alongside other films of this type in a nice 4-film box set. He said, hinting to the video release gods out there.
Yeah,
Please.
it's a shame when Severin did their triple bill of Blu-rays that this wasn't thrown in as well. Because it looks good. It's got a good cast, good looking cast as well.
Yeah.
The cinematography was by Joe D'Amato under the name of John Larson, and I have just found George Eastman's writing credit is under the name Alex Carver. So not even George Eastman. So he's like Luigi Montefiore, aka George Eastman, but even that was too close. So he's added another layer of fake names into the thing, which is
I'm reminded of how many fake names Jess Franco hid behind as he was producing so many films over the years. He was just grabbing names from fiction and throwing them up on the screen to pretend that he was, you know, somebody else. Yeah.
Now, is this our first Joe D'Amato film on the podcast? I think it might be.
Well, I mean, he did have a bit part in our last movie. Kind of an uncredited role in our last film.
Joe D'Amato.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said George Eastman. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. No. George Eastman was there.
Oh, but with Joe D'Amato.
In terms of Joe D'Amato, he's all over Italian.
This may be our first. Yeah, I don't know that we have talked about Joe D'Amato before. He is one of those names who even friends of mine who love this kind of cinema. They're a hard sell on Joe D'Amato, and I can understand why. I mean, you can more often than not, if you go down the rabbit hole with him, end up watching just porno film after porno film and realize, why am I wasting my freaking time here? But
yeah. So Aristide Massachesi, which was the name he used primarily when he was doing cinematography, and he was cinematographer on a lot of movies, like nearly 200 films. As cinematographer. I'm just trying to find some examples of that we might be able to mention.
Oh, as a cinematographer? There's a long list of credits that he worked on.
Loads. Like lots of westerns and all kinds of.
Well, I mean, he shot A Quiet Place to Kill for Umberto
Lenzi. Yeah. That's it. Well spotted.
He also shot What Have You Done to Solange, a film that we've talked about here on this show
before. Yeah. And he was on Hercules in the Haunted World, way back when. But it's as a director that we best know him as Joe D'Amato, and like you said, there are just so many, and he's done some really good ones, but then it starts to get kind of worse and worse as he gets into the 90s.
I would be able to defend arguing that it gets better and better because it depends on what you're looking for in a really weird way.
That's true. I mean, obviously, you did the sort of Black Emmanuel films, of which I have seen Emmanuel in America. I think that's the only one of those I've seen. That one, which was very good, actually. Quite disturbing.
It's a disturbing film. Yes, it is.
I did also. I've seen Beyond the Darkness. I actually wrote the Blu-ray booklet for the UK release a few years ago.
Fascinating film.
Which I think I can now confess, because it's been about 6 years, that I had never seen Beyond the Darkness before I wrote that.
Oh wow! You had to sit down, absorb the film, and then write about it. Wow.
No, my confession goes even further. I didn't see the film until after I'd written it.
What kind of psycho are you?
I wrote a booklet about the UK censorship of Joe D'Amato. So I was looking at that film and Anthropophagus, and mainly his kind of 80s video nasty films. And so I wrote about the kind of UK reaction to those rather than specifically that movie. But it's a very interesting film. I'm a fan of Ator the Fighting Eagle.
I am too. We may be we may be part of a very small club on that.
I did actually guest on the B Movie Cast maybe about 3 years ago talking about Ator, although I haven't watched any of the sequels. There's a few of those.
I enjoy the sequels as well. The third one is completely insane. It was not directed by Joe D'Amato, and it almost feels like the third one feels kind of like how to put it. The third one feels like we're talking about a napkin-sized screenplay concept being brought to life with very little in the way of cash, but being done in such a way that if you get on its wavelength, it kind of becomes mesmerizing because it's just ignoring the kind of it's basically generally known as Iron Warrior, and it's actually available on Blu-ray over here in the States anyway. And it was directed by a director who I usually have a lot of trouble with, Alfonso Brescia. But it's I don't know. I kind of fell in love with it because it is such a strange sketch of a film that it just kind of. You will have an action set piece that tells part of the story, and then the idea is that the characters need to travel to another place. So instead of having all of the footage or even an attempt at making footage that would convince you that these people then take time to travel to another place, we just have some fog or mist cover the screen, and then we're there.
Right.
It becomes this thing where as soon as you realize what they're doing, it kind of is mesmerizing, and I may be the only human being in the world who wants to stand up and defend Iron Warrior, but boy, are we off track because Joe D'Amato had nothing to do with it. So
no, I like the first one. There's a great sequence where Ator has to fight his own shadow, and like it's just so basic, but Joe D'Amato's cinematography experience kind of makes it work. And it was around that time when I think Laura Gemser stopped doing the films and started doing the costuming for him, and then spent the rest of her career making costumes for films instead of taking her clothes off. Which she'd done a lot for him. I did also watch Caligula: The Untold Story, which was interesting, but it was
I found it fascinating. But.
Yeah, it was okay. I'm glad I saw it, but it was not a film I felt that I would ever watch again.
I can understand your understand your thinking there. Yes,
but it was interesting. So, just such a varied director. There could be somebody somewhere could do a Joe D'Amato podcast and just talk about him every episode. There's so
my
much.
Goodness, yes. Because once you start getting into the films that he produced. For other people, when you start talking about especially the Filmirage films, he was producing horror films for other directors usually, and sometimes stepping in to help out in various productions.
Yeah,
man, don't get me wrong, they're not the greatest horror films in the world, but you can't take your eyes off of them most of the time.
Yeah, really interesting guy, very busy, always working right up until he died. At quite a young age, really.
Yeah, he really did pass away far too soon.
Yeah. On the Emmanuel in America Blu-ray, there's a really good kind of hour-long interview with him that I watched a couple of years ago, I guess. Fascinating guy. Anyway, so that's Joe D'Amato covered, and George Eastman we know all about. Anyone in the cast that you want to mention? Al Cliver, obviously, as Nexus or Nissus.
I want to talk about a few of these folks. First of all, Al Cliver, it was hilarious. I did, unfortunately, make my dear Beth watch this film with me. Forewarned her that, what it was beforehand. But so as the film starts, Al Cliver kind of stands out because he's a good-looking man. He's blonde. He's very much the big, beefy, masculine guy who comes off as a truly good guy in the movie. Yeah. And I mentioned his name at one point, and I said, oh, by the way, I don't remember how this film goes, but Al Cliver usually plays good guys who do not make it to the end credits. So just hang on there.
Fair enough. Yeah, and, I mean, I'm used to him being the films that I've seen him in. He's always been a bit of a sad sack. Like, I haven't seen that many of his movies, but I did just recently watch Demonia, where he just plays a kind of depressed alcoholic.
Yeah.
And I think even in Endgame, which we're going to cover very shortly, his character's quite depressed in that as well. So I was quite surprised. And even, I think he's more of a hero in Zombie Flesh Eaters, which I have seen. But yeah, in this film, I was like, oh, he's going to be the hero and the romantic lead. I was quite pleased because I'm just used to him being a bit miserable.
Well, the amazing thing is he's still alive, and we should say his real name, Pierluigi Conti.
Yeah, I would go with that. And of course, he retired. He just sort of stopped about 30 years ago. But I guess the Zombie Flesh Eaters royalties just keep rolling in.
Who knows? If he is comfortable in retirement, so much the better. He's done enough to entertain me over the years to earn my goodwill and any money that I could send him as well. I mean, my goodness, this was a man who was in The Beyond and Zombie and oh my goodness, how so many. Well, Murder Rock, which is a film that I have a lot of time for, but other people demur. But yeah, he's a welcome addition to any film, and and he's, like I said, there's just something about him. Once you've seen him on screen, he really does kind of stand out, and not just because he's blonde, but because he's actually pretty good on screen. He really is.
So as you mentioned, he is the leader of a gang who, I guess, if we're being generous, we'll call gladiators. And the opening sequence, I think this is a film where, because people may not have seen it so much, I don't want to give so much of the plot away.
Oh, okay.
So we can just kind of have a general description of some of our favourite bits, but I don't want, because there are some genuine sort of twists and turns that I didn't see coming, and like you mentioned, the kind of time slip thing is sort of interesting. So before I just launch into this plot summary from the book, is there anyone else in the cast that's sort of struck out to you that you wanted to mention?
Oh, well, just briefly.
They're mostly they're relatively obscure. We have got another connection to Ator, though. I wondered if you'd noticed that.
We may be on the same page. Before we get there, let's mention Peter Hooton.
Oh, okay.
Who's the American actor who once you've seen him, you probably might remember him as well. He was in a lot of American television in the 70s. And of course, had a nice role in the original Inglourious Bastards in '78.
Oh, yeah.
Famously, he was the first on-screen Doctor Strange in a TV movie back in '78. I recommend watching that movie and being altered with booze or some other substance, if possible, beforehand, because it's fun. But man, Doctor Strange, it's
strange.
It's not what you expect. Let's just say that, especially not these days. But he's an actor who he kind of stopped making movies in around the late '80s. But at the same time, there's something familiar about his face. He looks like several other American actors, and he can kind of be justified in thinking that he's somebody else sometimes.
Yeah.
But he had a little period of time there from the late '60s through the late '80s where he was working pretty regularly. I mean, he was in Orca and a few other films of particular note. So it's interesting to see him in this. I had completely forgotten he was in this. Then we should probably mention the female lead, Sabrina Ciani.
Yes,
the Italian actress in this,
she was the lead in Ator, which is a really, well, as we've said, is really fun. But yeah, she's got quite a really good character, I think, in this.
Yeah,
film.
She actually, and honestly, her character is threaded throughout the film and actually has a great deal to do. She gets to be a warrior woman and revengeful lover and all of these kinds of things. But I didn't realize just how many movies she was in her very short career, because by the late '80s, once again, she's another person who had decided that she'd had enough of acting on the screen. But she was
did
in,
some. Oh, sorry, go on.
Oh well, no, I'm impressed. I remembered her from Hunters of the Golden Cobra for Antonio Margheriti, and unforgettably in Lucio Fulci's Conquest, in which she's naked the entire time.
Do you know, I still haven't seen Conquest. I know it came out on Blu-ray as one that's on my wish list.
It's you kind of need to. I'm surprised that someone hasn't sat you down and forced you to watch it, because it came out in the magical year of 1983 when all things were possible and nothing was psycho.
Yeah.
Well, actually everything was psycho, and Conquest is almost indescribably strange.
She's in another one of those kind of post-Conan films called The Throne of Fire. Do you know that one?
I've seen it. I saw it years ago. My memories of it are very dim, but I do remember it. She was also in, let's just say some very interesting titles that I know I've seen, but I can't remember because I just haven't seen. Well, like Umberto Lenzi film Daughter of the Jungle.
Yeah.
I'm not. I think I've seen that.
And she's in Enigma. That's Fulci, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, she apparently has just a small little cameo in that, but she was obviously someone who she worked with Fulci a couple of times in that respect. She worked with Jess Franco on White Cannibal Queen in I guess that was in 80. I think it was 1980, and then like I say, she was in a number of films in her roughly decade on screen, but until rewatching this one, she's not someone that I thought to myself I really should pay a lot of attention to. But honestly, yeah, she's a lot of fun. She made another Umberto Lenzi film called Black Cobra in '84. I mean, you can have a lot of fun checking out her filmography. And the only other actor on screen that I would point to and say we should probably say something about is Donald O'Brien. He's the bald bad guy in charge of the bad guys in the final half in the second half of the film.
Yes.
He's often credited as being an Irish film and television actor. But to be honest, I had no idea he was Irish at all. This film actually turns out was one of the first movies that he was involved in after he recovered enough from an accident he had to get back to work. And he's although I could not tell it because I didn't know beforehand, he was a little limited in how he could move around after this accident. He apparently fell. He slipped in the bathroom and hit his head, and he was in a coma for 3 days. This was in 1980. He paralyzed half his body, and it took him about 4 years to fully recover. And he never really completely got all of his mobility back, it seems. But So this movie was actually one of the first things he worked in once he could get back to work.
He's quite unrecognizable with his shaved head as well, because a lot of people would otherwise know him as Dr. Butcher in the Zombie Holocaust or Dr. Butcher MD, but he's got a full head of hair in that one, so not quite so recognizable.
But he turns up in this film and also in the new Gladiators for Lucio Fulci. He's got a very striking look, so you can see why he would want to be. He plays a mad scientist in Fists of Steel for Sergio Martino in '86. So he continued to work, but I was unaware until looking at his resume just the other day that he had this accident, and it diminished him over time. That was a shame.
Yeah, he's in The Train. Is that the Frankenheimer film?
Yeah, that is the classic Frankenheimer film. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's such a good film.
Oh, he was in so many good films early in his career, man. Night of the Generals.
Okay.
And if you're like us, he's in Run Man Run, the spaghetti western, and just so many good films.
I did actually just do about a year ago. Actually, speaking of Night of the Generals, I was on Cult Connections again, talking about Night of the Generals. So there's another plug. Anyway, okay, loads of good people. So should we have a go at the plot? We've got about 10 minutes left, so let's see what we can do.
Do it, man.
So
do
this
it.
is the plot in this French book translated into English, and I don't entirely agree with all of their summary, but let's see how far we get. In the year 2020, it's anything goes in the USA and things go bad. Post-atomic... Again, I feel like I should be reading this in an American accent. Post-atomic Texas has once again become a land of adventure. Our story begins with the assault of a religious community, which allows the director some typically Latin outbursts. A priest is crucified, a nun savagely raped, and another character... Now, I missed this bit, I think. Another character commits suicide twice.
Oh, well, in the print that I've seen, which is a choppily restored, a print that restored all of the violence. What we actually see is this person drag a shard of glass across their throat, and they actually do it twice, but each time is a separate shot, and the idea seems to be that they're not. It's nasty. It's nastier. It's nastier because it seems as if the person doesn't feel like they're dying fast enough, so they cut their throat a second time. It's pretty. It's pretty effective, but I could understand how someone coming into the film might think, well, wait a minute, we just saw that.
They think it's an editing mistake in the book.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, and I'm going to put fortunately in air quotes, a regiment of Texas Rangers, they're calling them here, not gladiators, bare-chested and cartridge belts in evidence, arrives on the scene. In the ensuing battle, Nissus, I swear they call him Nexus.
Exactly. In the English dub, it does sound like Nexus.
Yeah, but everywhere you see it written down, it's Nissus. Nexus managed to save Maida, a young woman who reveals to him the existence of a community of survivors. So that's the setup. And my main problem with this is, so you've got this band of warriors who are coming to save the day, but they deliberately stand there and wait until pretty much everybody that this bunch of Germans is attacking are dead, and then they jump in to save the day. I'm like, what are you waiting for?
Well, one has to give them the idea that perhaps they were trying to get into place so that they could launch their attack with the most success.
But they only managed to save one person. Everyone else is dead.
Yeah, it is kind of true.
They're not very good at their job.
Well, maybe we shouldn't refer to them as saviors, but more along the lines of vengeance takers, because they're not really saving anybody.
I was also very confused here. I don't know about you when the film started, and the people that they're attacking, we hear them speaking, and I'm sure they're speaking German, and it had me frantically checking that I was watching the right language version.
My copy had the same. My copy had the same little. I had the same little worried expression on my face as we were watching.
So
it.
that's
going, oh my goodness.
That's worth mentioning. If anyone's going to watch this, that isn't a mistake. It's just apparently they're speaking in German. Why there'd be a group of marauding rapists in Texas, a German marauding rapist in Texas in 2020, who can say? But
hey, there are larger questions about certain things in this movie. First of all. Before we go too much further, we do have that time jump after this.
Well, yeah. So she says, I know about some people just a few miles from here. I'll take you there. And then we just cut to Al Cliver wearing dungarees with a slightly bushier beard and a hard hat. And like you're like, wait a minute, is this before the post-apocalypse?
Yeah, I was starting.
Why is everybody
getting a look back in time?
We've gone from everybody being dressed like it's Mad Max to everybody just being dressed like it's the 70s slash 80s. And it made me think of, I don't know how familiar you are with the SpongeBob SquarePants movie, but I've...
not at all, so to say.
I've seen this many times. It's one of the funniest films ever made, and we're all big fans of it in my house. But the Bikini Bottom loses the recipe to the Krabby Patty. So they can't have Krabby Patties anymore. And immediately, so SpongeBob has to go off and try and find it, but immediately the entire town turns into Mad Max post-apocalypse world. There's like a mushroom cloud goes off over it, and then everybody is wearing leather and bullet belts and studs. And then at the end, when SpongeBob comes back with the recipe, everybody just suddenly just like whips that off, and they're back into their normal clothes. And Squidward is just standing there, and he says, wait a minute, you mean we could take this stuff off the entire time? And it just made me think of that here. They're like, wait, so they didn't have to wear all that stuff? Like the Mad Max look was just an aesthetic choice rather than a post-apocalypse survival, because apparently they've got plenty of regular clothes to go around after all.
Apparently it was a choice. They didn't want to stand out and and look like they didn't know what they were doing. So
Yeah. So now he works in. It's basically this. This is where we get to the Mad Max 2 part of the plot, I think.
Pretty much, yeah.
They're running some kind of coal-fired power plant. Although
it's really vague. It is some kind of plant that can generate power, therefore electricity.
Who are they generating it for? Is it just themselves in their little village?
That would appear to be the idea, but some of the dialogue throughout the rest of the film seems to be that they're thinking that by getting this thing up and running, it would be the beginning of the ability to start having a larger settlement, more people, which is logical and makes sense. But at the same time, the film is much more interested in roaming bands of violence than it is in actually delineating plans for saving the society in the future. It gives lip service to it, but yeah, that does seem to be the idea. Is this thing is a way to have the future, crawl up out of the dirt and become something better again. So
like Mad Max 2, this place suddenly comes under attack from another marauding band, but this marauding band is led by another guy with a brilliant name. They've all got good futuristic names. This one is a guy called Catch Dog.
Oh yes, and Catch Dog actually used to be one of the quote-unquote Texas Gladiators that we saw at the beginning of the film.
He was in their gang.
Nasty one, He was a nasty one.
So Nissus kicked him out, and he formed his own gang of bikers, and they all turn up and trying to take the plant, but they are being backed up by this new fascist order who had decided that the way to lead the world now into the future is by becoming fascists, and Donald O'Brien.
Fascism does seem to be the fallback for almost every scumbag.
This is post-apocalypse, but just like the guys in the power plant who've managed to find some normal clothes, he's managed to find an old Nazi uniform somewhere.
And plenty of semi-official military uniforms for his cohort of shield-wielding weirdos, too. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, their soldiers have got these brilliant shields that have just, got a big hole cut out the middle, but it's because they've got some kind of heat shield generated. So if you shoot at them, because bullets are hot, they bounce off. Now, I don't know how nobody saw the flaw in that design earlier on.
Yeah, because these things do not stop spears or arrows. And man,
they
pay a price for that later on.
In the design phase, nobody thought, well, okay, what kind of weapons do people have in the post-apocalypse world? Well, they've only got bullets, so we'll be fine.
And right about the time an arrow sprouts out of your left eye, you realize that there was a problem with this.
Yeah, duh. Yeah, it's really funny. So I don't want to say too much more. So so Nexus Nexus has set up he's got a life now in the year 2020 or possibly 2025. I don't know.
We don't.
He's kind of in a relationship with Maida. They've got a daughter called Kezia.
Yep.
I think, and he's like a foreman now, and we're just in a factory. But then. Yeah, the whole place gets raided by these fascists and Catch Dog's biker gang, and it all kind of falls apart. And then we get to, in another time jump, we're in a saloon, and there are people gambling, and then we meet cowboys, and we go down a mine. And
we get heavily into everyone just staring right at the camera and going, yes. This is essentially a spaghetti western.
Yeah.
You need to know that.
Yeah, because then we go full out cowboys and Indians.
To a degree,
Obviously, this is 1983, so the spaghetti western, Italian spaghetti western production had ground almost entirely to a halt. But presumably,
It's
they
over
still
by
had
83. Yeah.
they still had plenty of costumes in the cupboard, I guess, which is so they were able to pull it out.
So that definitely helps here because, well, here's the thing. I mean, if we're going to pretend that this is all taking place in Texas, and there is a sign at the refinery or the power plant or whatever we're going to call that place that identifies it as someplace in Texas. Wait a minute. Before we go too far, I do want to point out my favorite little funny by accident moment.
Yes,
in the
you're
film,
about to say the same thing I'm thinking.
which is there is a sign, well, a couple of signs actually,
yes,
that spell out that the materials being messed with in this particular room are explosive, and it's explosive is spelled wrong.
Yes.
It has an S shoved in there after the X.
Yeah.
Now, you know a good deal more about the Italian language than I do. Would that be a common mistake for an Italian trying to craft something in English?
I don't think they use the letter X all that often.
Okay.
So possibly they would lean more to... I'm not actually sure what the Italian word for explosive is, but I could look it up. It's not one that comes up on Duolingo very often.
Well, that is one of those moments where, you know, it's right around the time where we're shown the sign indicating that we are in Texas, and then we are given multiple shots of these signs, giving us every indicator that either everyone in Texas cannot spell that word, or we are definitely not in Texas.
It reminds me of there's another Italian film that has a really badly spelt. So what is that one? I think it might be in The Beyond. Isn't there a sign in The Beyond that's quite funny? I can't remember.
The one that comes to mind for me is in Living Dead in Manchester Morgue, and I can't remember exactly what the word is, but you're actually seeing it from behind because it's the name of an office printed on glass, and so we're seeing it from behind. But even from behind, you can see, oh, it's misspelled. Wait, that's not...
Okay. Yeah, I just looked it up, and in Italian, explosive is esplosivio, ES. So yeah, they don't really use X very often, so that might be why they threw an S in there just to be on the safe side. But yeah, it's pretty funny.
Instead of checking, it's just like...
So I mean, the book is quite generous to the film. This film often is said to have a disastrous reputation, but they like it, and I think I like it too. And what did you think?
I was willing to come in here hot and defend this movie because I was surprised. I did not have a firm memory of what I thought of this movie from decades past. So when I sat down to watch it again, I honestly fully thought that I was going to sit there and think, okay, this one's not one of the best in the genre. This one is, it's what it is. But I have to admit, I really enjoyed this a lot. This one, I enjoyed it more than I expected to, and I guess maybe because I had my expectations set a little lower than average, that might account for it. Yeah. But to be blunt, man, I had a lot of fun with this. I mean, don't get me wrong; it's definitely an R-rated. You know, it's got rape, it's got tons of violence. You understand what I'm saying? But
yeah,
I did not expect this to be the fully entertaining 87 minutes that it was. I honestly thought that I was going to feel like I was at times kind of trudging through this, you know, for the good of the show. But no, man, I do now. I'm deadly serious when I say that I really hope that this one gets some kind of, you know, high definition release so that more people can be introduced to it, because I think that, don't get me wrong, it has its flaws, but at the same time, man, the pluses I think far outweigh the minuses in it.
And I think they were aware that it wasn't hanging together while they were shooting, because there's a very useful little scene where our two main characters sit down about halfway through and have a bit of a conversation to fill us in on what the hell's going on.
That helps a lot, actually.
It brings the audience up to speed, fills in the gaps, and then we're ready to carry on with the action, which we did kind of need. So there's a few problems, and the structure is a bit all over the place, but I was never bored, which is always, you know, the worst. That's the sign for me that films are not working, is if you're bored. And a film like this, you wouldn't want to be bored, and I wasn't. It's quite the action is really good. There's some great stunt work. People get set on fire.
Those flamethrowers come out of nowhere too.
Yeah, people flying off motorbikes left, right, and centre. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of pretty darn interesting stunts.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of these productions could get really ragged and people could get hurt doing these stunts, but I don't see any evidence of that. But at the same time, there's there are action sequences that are well shot. It's clear that Eastman was right to bring in Joe D'Amato, because from what I understand, he didn't feel like he really had the experience to handle the action sequences. But if it was Joe D'Amato handling those action sequences, he blends together all of the action pretty effectively, regardless of the budget level. And there's some good use of slow motion at times. It's pretty effectively done stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really good. Yeah, I like this film a lot. There's just loads of great elements that hold it all together. And one thing I did want to mention is the score. I think I might have mentioned it earlier, but anyway, Carlo Maria Cordio, just worth mentioning. I think it's got a great sort of 80s pop, futuristic synth score. But this is the same composer who gave us things like Ator, the Fighting Eagle, Caligula, Endgame, which has got a great soundtrack, Iron Warrior, which you were just talking about. Loads of films, La Casa 4, Shocking Dark, he was just working in Italian exploitation right the way through the 80s and 90s. Even Troll 2, so
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Okay. I did not look that far into his
What's
credit
not to
listing.
love?
Okay.
And Shocking Dark, the Terminator ripoff.
Oh, Shocking Dark is such a terrible film. I love it. It is such a bad movie.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. So it's really professionally made, slick, good-looking cast. Some weird little nice little costume touches, and and also I swear I recognise some of the same bits of abandoned factories that we just saw in Bronx Warriors, and I'm imagining we'll see those again in future episodes. But yeah, so do watch this movie too if you haven't seen it. It's easily available on YouTube. And I know some of you do want to play along at home. Which brings me to, so I've been a very poor podcast host of late because I hadn't checked any of our emails for about, I think it told me I hadn't logged in for 6 months.
Oh my God, really?
It's very poor. So apologies. We have actually had some messages. Somebody asked whether we could tell them what films we're going to do, which is a great idea, and I don't know why I don't really ever do that. So let me just quickly tell you that coming up next, we've got 2019, After the Fall of New York.
Which means we're traveling back in time at least 1 year. How sad.
And then we've got Endgame, Raiders of Atlantis, Exterminators of the Year 3000, Warriors of the Year 2072. And then to finish things off, we've got A Man Called Rage and The Final Executioner. So quite a journey there through the wastelands of the post-apocalypse world.
One quick question for you. I have to admit that the last two that we're going to cover, Man Called Rage and Final Executioner, are films that I don't think I've seen. I know that sounds crazy considering how much I love this particular genre, but how many of this list have you put on the list simply because you haven't seen them before and want to put yourself in that position? So of the whole list, I'd only ever seen 10th Victim, Bronx Warriors, Endgame, and Warriors of the Year 2072 before. Cool. Okay.
So about half of them are first-time watches for me.
Oh, that's great, because I really do love. I love the fact that at least one of us can come to some of these movies as a first-time viewer.
Well, you can pretty much safely rely on that being the case for most of the films we do on the podcast, because most of the stuff I'm coming to completely new. But I wanted to mention, that was one thing that we got asked about. I wanted to thank some more of our coffee donations. We've received some from Mike Totino and also Brian Moore. So thank you so much for buying us a virtual coffee.
Thanks to both of you very much. Yes.
And anyone else wants to do that, you can find the link in our show notes. But or if you just go to ko-fi.com and look for Wild Wild Podcast, you'll find us on there. Brian Moore mentioned, he sent him in his message, I just got confirmation, this is a bit of trivia about Planet of the Vampires. I just got confirmation that Peter Martell is the uncredited Captain Sally's in Planet of the Vampires. Midway through the film, he is replaced by Massimo Ricci. No one knows why.
Huh.
I don't know. There you go. So that's a random fact that probably needs more. So Brian, get in touch again and tell us how you know that, and yeah, tell us a bit more.
Yeah, it makes me want to dig
Intriguing.
out.
So I
Tim Lucas's Baba book to find out if there's any information there. Yeah,
I didn't even realise that there's a character who gets replaced halfway through by somebody else. I never noticed that.
Neither did I.
So that's quite interesting. And emails.
Well,
so,
come on. Let's be honest, man. All Italians look alike. I mean, come on.
So I just also wanted to mention some emails that we had. We've had one which is possibly spam because it's from somebody called Ilima and it just says ciao. So ciao Ilima, whoever you are. Just says ciao. It's kind of random. Michael Rosenbaum got in touch with this was back in December, I'm so sorry. And he said he was looking forward to our Hercules podcast. He just came across this poorly produced interview with Richard Harrison. He is everything an Italian genre film star should be in their retirement. So he sent me a YouTube link to an interview. It's like a half-hour long interview with Richard Harrison, former Italian genre star, who I believe he's still with us. Lives in Malibu in a lovely villa, and
nice.
Just talks for half an hour about his career in Euro cult. So I've just tweeted the link out to that. If anybody wants to have a look at that, it could be quite interesting. I'm not sure if we've done a film with Richard Harrison in yet, but I'm pretty sure I've looked through his list again, and like he did a lot of Euro spy films and stuff like that, so I know I've seen him.
Oh, if we keep doing this long enough, we're going to cover a movie with him.
Definitely. And I wanted to send a special apology to Lee Howard, who sent us a great email also back in December. And so I just wanted to quickly share that with you because he makes a few good points. Says, greetings, recently discovered the podcast and delighted to be in the company of fellow enthusiasts of Italian genre cinema. I'd primarily been invested in gialli for years, but had never really made any major inroads into some of the other Fellonis, such as SF Italia or Sex Comedy Italiano, or even the Italian crime movies remained a stone largely left unturned for me. And I'm really glad to hear that, because I sort of think that's what we're here to do, is to promote things apart from the gialli, because anyone who's into cult cinema knows the gialli, but there are so many other Italian films to discover.
Oh yeah, there's too much out there to a large degree.
Yeah.
And if people in my heart of hearts, what I think that a show like this can do is point some people toward something that they might not have otherwise thought about, indulging in as far as viewing is concerned. And it's, if we can bring some attention to it, that's kind of been the whole reason I've been a podcaster for a dozen years now, which is the idea of just trying to shed some light on some of these lesser known pieces of entertainment. And if that's the effect we're having, so much the better. That's what I want to do.
It's a public service. I mean, that's why you'll probably never hear us do a giallo on this podcast, and it's not because I don't like them, but it's just because there's like a million giallo podcasts, and everyone else would do a much better job than me. I mean, you do a great job on the giallos that you've done on your podcast. So,
well, I mean, we've done a giallo, but it had nothing to do with the fact that we wanted to cover a giallo.
Oh, that's true.
It was one of Luigi Cozzi's best films.
I'm going to backtrack. We have done one giallo. We may never do any more.
and we weren't doing it because it was a giallo.
Exactly.
It's a very different reason. That's true.
I'd already forgotten about that one. So he says, huge thanks for your efforts and the informative and welcoming discussion on each show. Have all the episodes downloaded and working my way through with zeal and enjoyment. And you'll like this, even grabbed some of Rod's The Bloody Pit episodes off the back of listening to the Wild Wild podcast.
Oh, well, great. I hope you enjoy them, man.
There you go. Anyway, you fellas have inspired me to try and seek out all the movies covered in order to watch along. Now that is a task.
That is.
As you release each season of the podcast, eager to learn what's still to come on the Luigi Cozzi season. Apologies, because I'm reading this so late. He's wondering whether we might do Peplum, Spaghetti Western, or Fumetti. Fumetti definitely coming up as our next full season. And yeah, I'm not against Peplum and Spaghetti Westerns. Certainly be something we would consider. Maybe we might do a Peplum mini season, perhaps at some point.
I think that would be fun to do about 5 of them. That'd be good.
So he's mentioned that he bought Matt Blake's science fiction book, which you recommended to me, and which then sparked off this whole podcast. So
solid book.
Yeah, so that chain is continuing. So he says, thanks so much for broadening my horizons. Thanks for the tip regarding the book. And it was a real highlight to hear the interview with the author. Oh, good, thank you. He says he did try to reach out to me via Letterboxd. I don't even know how you receive messages through Letterboxd, so again, apologies that was just ignored, but I didn't even know you could get messages on there. He was looking to try and find an English-friendly copy of Operation Moon. There you go, see, he wants to watch Operation Moon. That's how dedicated he is.
He's, dedicated, that's a word for it. Yeah.
And he also wasn't able to find any of the Decameron films that we did. But he has ordered it. So, I would say to anybody who's listening, basically, if they're not available on DVD or Blu-ray, but we've included them on the podcast, it will be because we found them either on something like Cinemageddon or Rare Lust. I don't think we're going to get into too much trouble for saying that. I mean, these films are long out of print or just hard to find. There are websites like that will have copies which may or may not have subtitles. So I know that's where I found the Decameron films that we did in that trilogy. Mm-hmm. Operation Moon was harder to get a decent copy. I ended up kind of editing my own one together using a subtitle file from one place and a print from another place. And anyway, I mean, if anybody else who's listening is desperate to see Operation Moon with English subtitles, do get in touch, and I'll happily share it with you offline so you can see that yourself.
Now you're going to be inundated with fans of Italian comedies looking to see that rarest of rare things.
We've got to stick together. I'll refrain. So he says, sign off by doffing my hat to you, kind sirs, for stoking my interest in Italian genre cinema once again, reinforcing my belief that it really is the gift that keeps on giving, as there are always more fascinating, bonkers and or brilliant stuff out there to see. Ciao for now. Well, thank you, Lee. I would agree with all of those points.
Yes, indeed.
And I did email him back to apologise, and he replied already. So he did actually find a copy of Operazione Luna, but I think his copy isn't as good as the one we've got, so I might be able to share it. But anyway, so he's trying to watch the films first, so he may not hear this recording of me reading out this email for a while. But anyway, it's great to thank you so much for getting in touch. We don't get many emails, which is possibly why I just stopped checking, because I just kept forgetting and we weren't getting many. So it's great to hear from people when we do. So if you would also like to share your thoughts and anything at all with us, really, then please do get in touch. It's simply wildwildpodcast@gmail.com or Twitter @thewildwildpod. We're also on Instagram. Just search for Wild Wild Podcast. And don't try and contact me on LinkedIn. Not LinkedIn. You can try me on LinkedIn. Letterboxd. Don't bother, because I don't know how that works, really. So maybe I should do a Wild Wild Podcast list on Letterboxd, which I think then maybe I should do that, because people could then comment at the bottom and I might actually see that. Okay, now that I've said that out loud, I'll have to do it.
It's not a bad idea.
Yeah, so I will put together at some point a Letterboxd list of every film that we've covered on the podcast. That's the kind of thing people do, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Not us, but yeah, there are people who do that kind of thing.
I'm slowly catching up with the way that podcasts are supposed to work.
It's a learn as you go medium.
I mean, it takes me long enough just to edit and get them out without all the extra bits, but if that helps us to grow, then that's worth it. It's great to get feedback like that from Lee, or from Michael, just to know that people are out there and listening to what we're doing and that we're not just shouting into the void. So, yeah, thanks so much. And hey, if you're enjoying this podcast, you could also leave us a review.
I'm sorry. Now I'm just imagining us as void shouters.
Yes,
that's a title. Podcasters and void shouters. Yes.
Yeah, leave us a review. Actually, I haven't even checked that for a while, so we might have some that I haven't seen. So that'll be my next thing to do before the next episode. If anyone's left us anything on Apple, like iTunes or Spotify or whatever. But yeah, please leave us reviews where people can see them, and that might encourage people to listen. Or tell your friends. I don't know, all the things.
Tell your enemies. I don't care.
Yeah, tell your neighbours. Pass it on to your children. I don't know. Just let's find more people that need to know about these films.
Yes.
Anyway, that's it. I have exhausted myself with all of that promotional chat. Thank you so much.
But you did it very well.
Thank you.
So I want to compliment you.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Rod, anything you want to add before we finish?
No, I'm just glad that people are listening to the show and enjoying it. This season is one that I've really been looking forward to. Yeah. So I'm glad that everybody else is finally getting a chance to hear us babble about these often surprising post-apocalyptic films.
Yeah. So we'll be back in a little while with 2019, after the fall of New York, or we could now call it 2019 before the coronavirus.
True. This is true.
New York fell in 2020. 2019, it was still fine. Yeah, it's interesting how these films, like some of them only set themselves very short time into the future. And then other ones are like, exterminators of the year 3000. Let's just go all the way.
Yes.
Whereas something like Bronx Warriors, by just setting it in 1990, means they don't have to worry about the cars or the clothes or anything like that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm always remembering how when Escape from New York came out, 1997 seemed like such a long time in the future.
That's it.
And now it's a long time ago.
That's right. Yeah. Well, okay. Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you for all the feedback, and we will talk to you all again soon. Bye for now.
Bye everyone.
Hurrah.